Life is difficult, but when we accept this truth, we transcend it. And looking at this through the lens of disappointment, when you can accept that life is going to hold disappointments, it makes life a little less difficult. Of course, disappointment is just a fact of life. If you really want to live life fully, you're going to have moments of disappointment. In fact, disappointment points us to things we care about. It is evidence that we really care about certain things happening. So it's not a bad thing if you find yourself feeling disappointed. Rather, it's an invitation to look at where are you holding on too rigidly to expectations, wherever you maybe place trust in people or institutions that lacked a little bit of discernment or realism, and where in the midst of your disappointment is it extending a silent invitation for you to grow in some way. Welcome to the Live Brave podcast. I'm Margie Worrell. Here you'll learn how to live and lead with more courage in an increasingly anxious world. If you'd love to bring your bravest self to your biggest challenges and the boldest vision for your life, you are in the right place. Let's get started. Hello there and welcome back to the Live Brave podcast. I'm glad you're with me today. I want to dive into disappointment today. That is, how do we navigate the emotion of disappointment when our expectations, our hopes, our trust has collided head on with reality in a way that we didn't see coming? And I know from my own experience with disappointment, and I have had my share, that it always leaves me feeling deflated. And yet I also know that in really unpacking how I came to feel so disappointed, I have always found myself a little wiser, a little braver, a little more resilient, and a little more discerning about what I should be expecting from life versus who I want to be and the commitments that I want to bring to my life. There's a wonderful book that I read many years ago. In fact, it was one of the first books I read that really just lit me up and ultimately led me onto the path I'm on today. And that book was called The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck. And a friend of mine at the time, I was living in Papua New Guinea, Port Moresby, and I had befriended a woman whose name is also Margie Hartley. And hello, Margie, if you happen to be listening to this, we haven't been in touch for many years, but Margie gave me The Road Less Traveled. And I just remember opening it up, and the first line stuck with me. It stuck with me for a long time, and I think it's so relevant to dealing with disappointment. And that is this: life is difficult, but when we accept this truth, we transcend it. And looking at this through the lens of disappointment, when you can accept that life is going to hold disappointments, it makes life a little less difficult. Of course, disappointment is just a fact of life. If you care about what you're doing, if you care about other people, if you really want to live life fully, you're going to have moments of disappointment. In fact, disappointment points us to things we care about. It is evidence that we really care about certain things happening. So it's not a bad thing if you find yourself feeling disappointed. Rather, it's an invitation to look at where are you holding on too rigidly to expectations, wherever you maybe place trust in people or institutions that lacked a little bit of discernment or realism. Where are you really looking at, and where in the midst of your disappointment is it extending a silent invitation for you to grow in some way? So when I think about disappointment, I think of it falling into three key buckets, shall we say. The first bucket is around our circumstances, our situation, the predicament that we're in. Maybe you were going for a job and you thought you had landed that job and then it was given to someone else. Maybe you put a lot of work into something. I know last year I put a lot of work into launching my book, The Courage Gap. I really hoped it would land in every bookstore. I was really hoping it was going to sell many tens, hundreds of thousands, and it didn't. And I found myself feeling disappointed. I had put a lot into it. I had really high hopes. And while I received wonderful feedback on my book and many people said it was awesome, getting that traction to really break through all of the noise with all of things that were going on in 2025. Well, let's just say I didn't get the outcome that I wanted and I felt disappointed. And, I had to lick my wounds a little at the end of last year. I say wounds, but I think the wounds of my own expectations of where I wanted things to go. And so over the holiday break, I took a lot of time reflecting on it, going, what did I do wrong? What did I fail to do that I should have done? What, did I do that I shouldn't have done? Where did what did I go, what did I get wrong here? And then recognizing that, there's only so many things I can control. And the number one thing I control is myself. And one, my commitment to what I want to do, my energy, my agency, and there's a lot of things outside my control. And so for me, the learning from the disappointment I felt was to be really discerning between what I am committed to and being attached to a certain outcome. A guy called John Aldridge talks about benevolent detachment. That is, that we should, give our best to whatever it is that lights us up, but not be holding on too rigidly to how it's all supposed to work out. I would like to just take a pause right now and share with you about a few things that I've got coming up that I'd love to share with you as resources. I invite you to check out my new LinkedIn learning course. This is by far the best, most beautifully produced course training program I have ever done in my life, thanks to the incredible team at LinkedIn Learning. There will be a link to that in the show notes. And of course, if you haven't read any of my books, I recorded nearly all of them except Make Your Mark on Audible. You can find them on Amazon. You can find them wherever good books are sold. But I'm going to share a link to my books page of my website below where you can learn about them, particularly The Courage Gap, which is my most recent, and You've Got This, a book that I feel like a lot of people who are standing on the edge, they know they need to do something, sometimes just need to have someone just give them a high five and say, you can do this, you've got this. And last but not least, if you would value someone to come into your team, your organization, to speak, to help level up how you all work. Imagine your organization where everyone is feeling brave enough to speak truthfully, to take risks, to say, I don't know, to make it safe for others. Imagine what you could unlock. So I have a page on my website. You are welcome to go there, check it out, or please refer me to the people in your world that are organizing events. I love to speak. It is a call on me. And I hope that at some point you and I will have our paths cross at some event somewhere down the track. All right. And so I as I've pulled myself up again this year and focusing forward, I'm like, okay, I'm doubling down on what's within my control, learn some lessons, but not to just drown in the disappointment and find myself over personalizing it. I'm a loser. I should have done this. Disappointment. It is not an indictment on who we are or life. It is ultimately just saying, hey, my expectations didn't align with the reality I faced and the circumstances I faced, which in hindsight, maybe were a little unrealistic anyway. It is a noisy world and it's a lot of effort to break through all of the noise as an author. The second bucket of disappointment we often have is in other people. And I'm guessing that you have felt disappointed by other people more than once in your life. Most of us have. And sometimes our response to disappointment is to become deeply cynical, as it is to disappointment in circumstances. We just become cynical on life. We give up any positive expectation on our life. But whenever you find yourself feeling disappointed in other people, it's probably traveling pretty lockstep with resentment, anger, hurt. How could this person have done that? How could they have betrayed a value, betrayed trust? And my experience when I'm feeling disappointed in other people is to just take a moment and look within myself and ask myself, where was I expecting them to be more infallible, than they could ever be, or more mature, or more evolved, or more together under pressure, where maybe they acted in a way and with the pressure that they felt that was very incongruent with the values that I assumed that they were trying to live by. I have had many friends who felt deeply disappointed in relationships where someone has betrayed fidelity. And I know that's obviously come with immense hurt and immense anger and bitterness and so many other emotions. And amidst all of that, there's a grieving. There's a grieving for the future that we thought we were going to have with someone, just as there's a grieving when circumstances don't go our way, when we don't land the bestseller that we wanted or the job that we wanted. We're attached to a certain future. And so with relationships, that's amplified so much more because it strikes to the heart of our sense of identity, of our faith in people and the goodness and the decency and our sense of belonging. We can be massively disappointed in someone who didn't include us or see us as central to their life as perhaps we saw them in ours. And that's deeply disappointing and hurtful and all those other things. And so the invitation in that is for us to look in ourselves and go, what is the part of me that was assuming that they were somehow a little bit more perfect, more infallible, less flawed, less human than they actually are? And to recognize that everybody, and I know this can be jarring for some, everybody at every moment is actually doing the best that they can. Now, I'm not saying they couldn't do better in a different moment, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't be expecting more of some people. And right now, I live just outside Washington, D.C., and I am surrounded by people who are deeply immersed in politics, whose livelihoods depend on politics, and, those are in power. And I hear a lot of conversations of a lot of people who are feeling really, really disappointed in those that have been elected and put into positions of immense power to lead with character, to lead with discernment, to lead with wisdom, to lead with compassion and humanity. And I don't want to get into a conversation further on that, except to say that yeah, it would be really nice to think that those that were in high office were always highly evolved humans, really mature, very self-aware, very grounded in the values that we want to see embodied in those in high office: integrity, character, etc. And yet they're not. And yet they're not. That is the reality we're in. And so whether it's someone close in your life or it's people who you want to trust, you want to look up to, you want to believe in, it's easy to find yourself feeling a little disappointed or maybe just a lot disappointed. And again, where is that due to us expecting more than is realistic? And the question is, what do you do with that? What do you do with that when people are really not living up to who you had hoped that they would be? Well, one thing that you don't do is deciding that you're not going to trust anyone. And of course, sometimes people do respond that way. I am never going to trust anyone again. And some people respond that way. I've heard people say, particularly after a really deep betrayal, that they will never trust anyone again. I had a client once who shared how she had felt very betrayed as a young girl. And now she is in a senior role in a big organization. And while she was always trying to be very authentic and building psychological safety, when I would talk to the people on her team, they would say, look, let's call her Susie. Susie clearly really cares about being a good leader, but we just don't feel like we know who she is. She always keeps her cards so close to her chest. We just don't really know her. And so because we don't really know her, we kind of don't feel we can really trust her. And so one person's failure is not proof of human failure. And so I just encourage you not to let a disappointment in a person or a group of people harden into deep cynicism? You can protect your heart without closing your heart. The answer when we are feeling disappointed and hurt by people is not giving up on people and not deciding never to trust someone, but is growing in wisdom, in discernment without losing compassion. It is just being really careful about who it is that deserves our vulnerability, who it is that deserves our trust. And so working through the disappointment we feel in others often really requires us forgiving them for who they are and for who they aren't. I know prior to my mum really stepping into a decline with dementia, I went through this exercise of just really wanting to make peace with the little grievances that I had with my mum. Now, we had not fallen out or anything. There was a lot of love, a lot of connection, just huge affection and expressed affection. But I still was a little mad at her with a few things that she'd done and failed to do, particularly regarding one of my brothers, my brother Peter, who had struggled and suffered just tremendously with schizophrenia. And I'd been a little mad at her for not having been more proactive, for not having been more assertive and seeking help, for just failing to be as strong and strident an advocate for him as he was really starting to go into this decline with this just horrendous, torturous, brutal mental illness. And I realized that Mum was just doing the best that she could. Was it what I would want her to have done? No, but she was doing the best that she could. And I remember one day in 2019, just being back visiting her and just saying, Mum, I just want you to know I love you and I forgive you for the times when you haven't been the way I wished you had been, when you haven't acted the way I wished you had acted, when you haven't been bold enough and brave enough, and you haven't been assertive as I had wanted you to be. And she said, oh, darling, I didn't realize that you felt that way. And I said, yeah, it's just sitting with me. And I just want you to know I forgive you. And she said, well, thank you. Thank you. And we just had a hug. And it was just this moment for me of just making peace with my mum for who she was and who she wasn't, and not holding that against her because I had felt disappointed in her. And of course, that is just one small example. But I just invite you to think about, where do you need to forgive someone for who they are and for who they're not? But where do you also need to forgive yourself for expecting them to be otherwise? Let me say that one more time. Who is it that you need to forgive for not being all that you wanted them to be, for being fallible and flawed and imperfect? And what is it that you need to forgive within yourself for expecting them to be otherwise? And I think there is massive freedom that comes from that. And that brings us to the third bucket of disappointment, and that is when we are disappointed in ourselves. And of all my experiences of disappointment, I think the most regular is in myself when I fall short of being who it is I want to be, when I feel like, oh, I haven't done a good enough job. I didn't deliver a good enough speech. I wasn't coaching at the level I wanted to be coaching a client at. I fell short of helping get them to a moment of breakthrough that I was really hoping for them, that I wasn't as loving with my husband again, that I was short-tempered or impatient, that I was disorganized and I just dropped the ball on something again. And so often the source of our greatest disappointment is in ourselves, that we fell short of being who it is that we want to be. And so I just invite you to forgive the unfinished parts of yourself and to forgive the former, younger version of yourself who did not know what you have since learnt. And here's the beauty in doing that. When you can forgive yourself, maybe forgiving yourself for trusting someone that in hindsight you wished you hadn't, for investing money and time in something that fizzled out or really came back and hurt you in some way. When you can forgive yourself for not getting it perfectly right, for falling short, for being imperfect, it just expands your capacity exponentially to forgive others when they disappoint you, and honestly, to make peace with life when life disappoints you. I think it's in a Buddhist teaching somewhere that all suffering comes from our attachment to how we want things to be. If you didn't have an attachment to it being a certain way, then you wouldn't be disappointed when it wasn't, which brings us back to this really key distinction between being committed to who it is you want to be, to the future you want to create, but not being attached to how it should all unfold. And my experience is just like when I was 18 and I was gutted, so disappointed when I didn't get the grades to get into the university course I really wanted to get into, that my grades had been just setting me up to believe that I would absolutely get into. I'd got these great marks and then I didn't. That the dots in life connect backwards, not forwards. And when I look back at that, I had to scramble and find somewhere to live through the newspaper. My whole time at university was just in random houses with random people that weren't even at college. In Australia, by the way, for American listeners, living in dorms is not part of college life. A lot of people just stay living at home. A lot don't leave their own city. And so for me as a country kid, I was really like just thrown in the deep end trying to find somewhere to live in a strange city. Without any connections and very little resources. When I look back at a big disappointment we had when, instead of moving back to the United States as we had thought we would do back in 2017, and we'd sent 2 kids ahead to boarding school, and I had 4 teenagers, and my husband said the company is not sending me back to the US, they're sending me to Singapore. And I was so disappointed and frankly, really bloody mad. Really mad. And I felt like the rug had been pulled out from beneath me. Again, now I can start to see how the dots connect. Didn't mean it was easy. In fact, it was very difficult. But I can see how none of us really know what the best outcome is. We have our idea of how it's all supposed to work out, as though we have this just extraordinary perspective on life, but we don't. We don't have it on, our perspective on life is limited in time. It's also just limited, period, in all of the different possibilities that could work out. And sometimes those big disappointments that derail all of our plans aren't ruining our life. They're actually revealing a higher path. And so whatever disappointment you are feeling right now, I just invite you, have faith that it will all work out. Even if you can't see how right now, have faith that actually those dots will connect backwards. And in this moment right now, when you're feeling so much disappointment, is a seed, a little seed in the ground of an equal or greater benefit. But that seed cannot grow if you're putting all of your energy into what went wrong and who went wrong and who let you down and who shouldn't have done what and what decisions shouldn't have been made. And as that cliche goes, it's like so often we spend so much time looking at all the doors that have closed, we don't see the ones that are opening. And as Ellen Langer, who is out of Harvard, said at an event that I was at with her many years ago, every situation can be turned into a win if we're looking for what that win might be. And it can take time to see it, and it can take time, obviously, for those seeds to grow and for it to blossom into something. But I know in my own life that the biggest disappointments I've had, the biggest setbacks, and the biggest hurts I've had have ultimately been a catalyst for immense growth, for new opportunities, for new possibilities, for me to discover things about myself, resilience, trust, discernment, wisdom that I would never have got otherwise. And the same is true for you. So, to quote Robert Frost, the only way out is through. If you're feeling disappointment, give yourself space and time to feel it. Breathe into it. Let that disappointment fill the space it needs to fill right now. But don't let it set up permanent residence like a dark storm cloud overhead. Do not let it have the power to keep you from trusting that people are good, that life is good, that the future can be really good. And, I might do another episode on the importance of holding on to faith and optimism and hope, even when we feel like there is no reason to do so. I think in the midst of disappointment, we have to just keep faith that good things will emerge the other side of it. And when you are operating from that mindset, from that belief that out the other side of disappointment are a whole array of possibilities that you may not be able to see from your current vantage point, it will expand your perspective, widen your aperture to look for them, to see them, and then to go after them and seize them. So I hope this has been helpful for you. Remember, disappointment will visit us all, but it does not have to be the final word. And when we live with hope, without the illusion that everything's always going to go our way, because that is just a recipe for disappointment, then it actually expands our capacity to live and lead with more courage, with more purpose, and of course, committed to the biggest, boldest vision for our future, committed to the person we want to be and the relationships we want to create, but without the attachment that it all has to happen a certain way. Thank you again for listening to this podcast. And if it has been helpful to you, please take a moment to rate it, to review it, subscribe if you haven't, and perhaps share this one with someone in your life that's been grappling with disappointment, because we all experience it. And when we can help lift other people when they're going through a dark time, it always comes back and lifts us too. We are braver together than we can ever be alone. Take care. I'll be back in the next week with a new episode of the Live Brave podcast.